Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am excited to see colleagues from numerous countries and different time zones. Welcome to the second session of the MHL Anniversary Conference. My name is Polina Ilieva, and I will be serving as a moderator. First, we will have 3 amazing presentations, and then we will open the floor for questions. And you are welcome to ask your questions in the chat at any time. We will read out these questions, then it's time for QA. And I want to remind that this meeting is being recorded and will be shared on the MHL website. Please allow me to introduce our first team from the Yale University Digital Humanities Lab. Catherine DeRose is the program manager for the Digital Humanities Lab, where she consults on digital humanities projects, teaches workshops on data analysis and visualization, and directs the Digital Humanities Teaching Fellows program. She received her PhD in English from the University of Madison of Wisconsin at Madison. Peter Leonard is the director of the Digital Humanities Lab at Yale. He received his BA in the art history from the University of Chicago and his PhD in Scandinavian literature from the University of Washington. Before coming to Yale in 2013 as the first librarian for digital humanities research, he served as a postdoctoral researcher in text mining at UCLA and was supported by a Google Digital Humanities Research Award. Please welcome Catherine and Peter.
Great, thank you so much. This is going to be a joint presentation, and so what we're going to do is switch off from me to my colleague Kathy in just a minute. So both Kathy and I work at Yale, where we have the privilege of working very closely with Melissa Graff from our Medical Historical Library just across the city. And we're actually going to be showing you some images from Yale today. We're going to be showing you both some non-medical heritage images and some genuine medical heritage library images. That'll be when Kathy takes over about halfway through this. I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit of my screen. Start out with some slides, and then we'll be doing some live demos. So we're going to be talking about visualizing medical heritage collections at scale. This is actually part of a larger effort in the Digital Humanities Lab at Yale that we sometimes call collection scale analysis. And by collection scale analysis, what we really mean is moving from kind of some of the traditional work that I used to do as an art historian of looking at maybe 30 or 50 or 100 images and trying to really read those quite closely, and moving towards a world where there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of images online at places like the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands, places like the Met Museum in New York, consortia such as the Medical Heritage Effort. What happens when we start digitizing all of these images and put them online in digital library systems? What new tools do we need to be able to make sense of this enormous explosion of digital content? And one of the answers to that is that this is a problem that's not unique to people studying the history of medicine or people studying art history. It's also something that's happening on the hundreds of pictures that we're all taking on our cell phones. So if you want to follow along at home, one way of exploring a real easy to see aspect of this notion of collection scale analysis is to pull out your own Android phone or pull out your own iPhone and try this at home. I'm going to do this at the same time. I'm going to go to my Photos app. It doesn't matter if I use Google Photos or Apple Photos, shouldn't matter. Find the search box, find the search button, usually looks like a little magnifying glass, and then just type the word cat into that search box and see what you get. Now I'll show you the cats that I get. They're on my PowerPoint screen too. There's hundreds of pictures. In fact, I guess there's like 307 pictures of cats. Many of these are my sister's cat. But of course, this isn't Flickr. I haven't gone through and labeled those images of cats. When I take a picture of a cat, I don't have to label it. I don't have to give a title. So the question is, what is going on in my smartphone that is enabling these captions, this descriptive text to show up? And the answer, of course, is that whether you know it or not, there are convolutional neural networks running either on your cell phone, in the case of most iPhones, or in the cloud if you use Google Photos or if you have an Android phone. And convolutional neural networks for image labeling or image captioning is something that's been happening for a while, but it really sort of took off around 2012. And people started demonstrating incredible effectiveness of convolutional neural networks for being able to label an image, either cat or dog or skateboard or bagel or banana. And what this means is we have really powerful contemporary modern systems that can apply labels to objects. And these convolutional neural networks are being developed by people in academia, they're being developed by Google, by Facebook, by Apple, and they're really running automatically behind the scenes on a lot of the technology that we touch every day. Of course, a network that can detect a bagel and a banana and a cat may not be a perfect network for if you're interested in 19th century medical imaging. It's just something designed for the images we have in smartphones. It's not designed for the images that are being put online by the Met Museum or by folks working in medical heritage. And so what we're going to show you today is some open source software from Yale called Pixplot that tries to take the power of some of these convolutional neural networks, which are very good at applying modern labels to images, and repurpose that power. Just take the energy, the commercial sort of entrepreneurialism that's going towards recognizing objects in pictures and selling an ad right next to it for a competing product. Take some of those industry advancements and use them for historical or cultural heritage material in ways that sort of uses the power of machine vision, but that reappropriates it in order to make these technologies responding to, I think, the questions that curators and other historians have. So I'll show you this sort of slide with a very brief description of what I'm about to show you in real life. We're going to be treating a bunch of artwork first, and then Kathy's going to show you some medical heritage images using an artificial network originally designed for captioning. So we're going to be taking that network, which normally results in decisions like cat or bagel or banana, and we're going to be stepping one layer back away from those modern anachronistic labels and into a sort of more shallow layer in the network, which is really best understood as about 2048 ways of seeing. Not as specific as cat or dog, but something reacting to patterns or lines or textures. And this gives us about 2048 abstract ways of seeing, about 2048 dimensions of vision. And then we have a dimensionality reduction problem. So what we need to do is to take that 2048 dimensional space, all the ways that the network sees in its ability to then decide if something is a cat or a bagel, and we need to project that space down using dimensionality reduction. So we're going to use a particular algorithm that uses the power of mathematical manifolds to take a very high dimensional space and compress it down to something I can show you on a screen. Then we're going to put it into a website. So what I'm going to show you right now is that website. And my first demonstration is going to be, everybody can now see a black screen on my mostly black. All right. We're going to take about 30,000 images from Yale's famous Center for British Art, and we're going to throw them on the floor. If I actually had thrown all of this artwork on the floor, then of course the artwork would have landed randomly. And it wouldn't have landed such that all of the caricatures here are in the same area. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see this scattering of images. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit more to a different area. So now, out of all those 30,000 pieces of artwork, what I actually have are all the landscape paintings that are in this cluster that is kind of in the top left. And this is true of all different kinds of things. If I go in here, you'll see there's an area where all the frames are. So this is basically a dimensionality reduction of a high dimensional space where every single piece of art has been mapped into a different vector, and then we've collapsed that space down. And what we've gotten is an automatic kind of semantic clustering of images that are similar. So all my animals are hiding out here in cluster 12. There is no category called animals that I know of in the Yale Center for British Art. This isn't like a tagging or a description problem. It is purely machine vision, ignoring all metadata, putting these images in the same place. The same is true of like 19th century photography. So here I have a large collection of 19th century photographs. Right now, these are about 30,000 images, and they're just ordered right now in the order that they were digitized by the museums. So there's nothing meaningful in this particular grid layout. There's just a bunch of pictures of people and places and things. What I can do though is I can change the layout of these images once they've been processed by Pixplot into this different layout, which may look like things are being thrown on the floor, but in fact, they've landed in really special ways. So this cluster here is a cluster of 19th century priests who all wore this very distinctive collar. And another cluster might be of people who are enjoying ski outings. So let's go over to the ski cluster here. Every picture in this particular neighborhood is going to be somebody on ice or skates or snow. And you can kind of see that when I zoom all the way out, that everything here is very light, whereas over here we're getting a lot of buildings. And this is sort of the buildings neighborhood in 19th century Oslo. So what we're seeing here is an example of Pixplot in action. And what it's doing is it is taking tens of thousands of images, scattering them on the floor, but magically kind of arranging them so that images which are visually similar, that have the same kind of semantic content in them, figures on ice skates, priests with collars, buildings, paintings of horses, all of these are proximate to one another. All of these form sort of archipelagos in a global world, in a sort of map of the ocean. And that's what the open source software called Pixplot does. It allows you to take images which are undescribed, which are not yet cataloged, and put them into a visualization system for you to be able to see these broad patterns. And we thought a really exciting thing to do might be to take some of the images from the Medical Heritage Library's collection of monographs. So we're dealing with print books here. And to see what happened when we started playing around with some of those medical images in software with Pixplot. For that, I'm going to shift over to my colleague, Kathy DeRose.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yes, as Peter just said, so now that we know a little bit more about how Pixplot came to be and how it works generally, we're going to take a look at how it's actually doing visualizing the Mhl collection specifically, or at least a comparatively small subset of it. So we should say we have just under 25,000 images here that we gathered from MHL's open Flickr album using Flickr's API. And so if I go ahead and enter the Pixplot, this is sort of the Mhl Pixplot now that'll appear. And what we can see is, if I just adjust some of the controls a little bit, is when I hover over the different spaces on the hotspots, what we can see at a glance is just the rich variety of items and images that have been captured within MHL's larger collection. So we can see that we have line drawings of medical images, we have advertisements, we have book stamps, photographs. In total, Pixplot has identified just around 108 clusters. But if we look at the top here, we can see that 3 of them in particular make up over half of the collection. And we can see that both because when I hover over something, there's that gray polygon shape. But we can also see, if we look at these orange bars underneath each of the hotspot images, that gives you an indicator for how representative that cluster is of the much larger collection. And so really, cluster 1, which we've labeled line drawings, itself represents just about half of the entire collection. And so if we zoom in to take a closer look at what's here, and I'll make these a little bit smaller again so there's not as much overlap, what we can see is that we do see some images of the brain over here, but we also have a lot of images of tumors. So it's not a particularly cheery cluster that we've gone into, but you can see that Pixplot's doing a really good job of identifying that these particular images seem to be linked and of the same thing. And if I zoom back out a little bit, what we can tell is still within cluster 1, so everything in gray right now is in cluster 1, so we're in cluster 1. If I zoom back into a different subset of it, we can see that within the cluster 1, within the line drawings cluster, we still have other subcommunities as well. So we just looked at the tumors one, but if I click here, we can see that we also have one on nasal passages. And so all of these illustrations will be different drawings of nasal passages. And for any one of them, if we were particularly interested in returning to the source for it, I can click on this icon here and it'll take me to the book that features that image in it. So you can get a little bit of that contextualization for how is this image actually circulating, what was the book. So that information is there. If we want to take a look at another cluster, if we want to look at the X-ray photos, which is the second largest collection, we can see once again, Pixplot did a really good job of gathering all of these images that indeed look similar together. And just like we saw with cluster 1, we do have these discrete sort of sub-communities even within the much larger X-ray. So if I look here, we have a lot of X-ray images of what appear to be rib cages. And I can use the selection tool here to actually take a closer look at what's going on in this collection. Because now I can view selected. And from here, we can get that sort of close view of what are all these images that are part of this cluster. If we were interested, we could download the metadata attached to them, either as a CSV file or a JSON file, or we could actually download a zip of the images themselves. And if I return back here, I know we only have sort of a few more minutes left, so I will skip cluster 3, but this is a live Pixplot that anyone can see if they were interested. What I would like to show, though, is we've been talking about these algorithmically generated clusters a lot, but there is the opportunity to add back in that human added metadata that you might have. So for instance, if we were really interested in looking at the whole collection once more, I can use this category dropdown up here, which has metadata that we grabbed from the Flickr album. So it represents the source museum or collector for the images. And we can see that if I select Columbia, that a lot of Columbia's contributions to this 24,000 image Pixplot is cluster 1. So Columbia has a lot of the line drawing images. Whereas if we look at the University of Toronto, I can make these darker again, we can see that they're really more distributed in terms of where their collection's drawing from. If I look at a place like the University of Maryland, Baltimore, we can see that they have some sort of in the outlier clusters, but we can also see that the majority of their contributions in the MHL Pixplot that we have is primarily these images of graduation photos. So we can kind of take a closer look at those. If we wanted, we could also view them in another sort of alternative grid view layout, which shows you sort of where the collection is coming from, what collecting institution has it, but also just gives you another layout so that you can sort of see everything spread out in more of a grid pattern, which could be sometimes a little easier to navigate. And then for the last view that I'll show in Pixplot, we also have the ability to arrange things into metadata groupings. And so if you wanted to see, again, we still have right now highlighted University of Maryland. If we wanted to go back to see Columbia's cluster, they're represented there. And what this view can actually be really helpful for is seeing where sometimes we might still have to go back and clean or reconcile our metadata. So if we wanted to look, the College of Physicians of Philadelphia Historical Medical Library is over here. But just shortly there under, we have the Historical Medical Library of the College of Physicians of Philadelphia. So we have sort of two different ways that what I assume are the same institution have been written out in the metadata field. And so that's something that we can think about for sort of the next version of this that we run, that maybe we want to combine those into one field and have those joined again. Another sort of future work step that we're thinking about is, because when we go back to sort of the UMAP view, because we have these really nice subclusters within line drawings and within X-ray photos, we might actually generate a Pixplot just of that cluster. So generate a Pixplot around line drawings, so that way we can really see the distribution of what kinds of images comprise that line drawings cluster. And so for doing that, we will probably run the Pixplot, but then also do some curation work in an admin mode that we've added to Pixplot, so that way you as the Pixplot creator would have more control over how you cluster things. And so for that mode, I'll just give you a quick view of what that looks like. And when we go in, and what we'll see is the admin view is where you can rename, reorder, and create new clusters, sort of based on things that you as the human find interesting. So we're not limited just to what the computer finds interesting. So you could delete things, you could choose different images, you can rename, etc. But so I know we were at time, and so I'll just say for a big thanks to Melissa Graff, as Peter said, who's been working really closely with us on this. And so for next steps, we hope to gather even more images and a more representative sample from the larger whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Peter. I see that we do have some questions already coming in, so we will address all the questions after the last presentation. Our next presenter is Krista Stracka, who is a rare book cataloger for the National Library of Medicine, History of Medicine Division. In addition to cataloging, her responsibilities include work on a range of digitization projects. Krista holds an MLIS from San Jose State University and BA in English from Millersville University of Pennsylvania. Krista?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see everyone and celebrate the Medical Heritage Library's 10-year anniversary with all of you. Let me share my slides here. So as closures of special collections over the past year have really affected our ability to physically handle materials in person. The importance of remote access to our digital collections has really become even more apparent. So in this session, I'm just going to briefly discuss our efforts over the last decade to increase the accessibility and discoverability of NLM's rare books printed before 1801 with few surviving copies in the world. This is definitely a work in progress with much to learn along the way. Included is a sampling identified or requested through our participation with 3 union catalogs or digital library projects that have or will be added to the Medical Heritage Library. These books feature the intersection of medicine with other disciplines, including literature, art, cultural studies, and technology. In the interest of time, I'll provide just a big picture view of these efforts without too much detail, but first I just wanted to give a brief background of our initial collaboration with MHL. So in 2010, NLM joined a small group of libraries to partner with the Medical Heritage Library Project, opening our collection to diverse new audiences. In the first 2 years, we were able to scan and contribute over 8,000 digital surrogates, dating back to 1722 as part of our first project, the NLM Medicine in the Americas project. This initial partnership aided in our development of our own digitization program, which has since contributed over 27,000 surrogates of books, films, and other collections related to the history of health and healthcare. Combining these collections with now even more libraries is just really shows how amazing, how many opportunities there are to make connection between these resources. We have learned a lot about the collection over the course of this project, including about the rarity of many of the materials from back in the colonial era and onward. Often while consulting online resources like the, for example, English Short Title Catalog or ESTC during the cataloging review process, which I'll discuss in a bit. In part, these discoveries prompted an exploration into the identification of additional unique holdings to increase their remote access and to their valuable research content. The goal is to really increase the discovery of and access to these items with limited surviving copies. These are items that most likely are not held by another library, or they might not be held by another institution that has an active digitization program. It's really an opportunity to place these in context with other materials and reach more diverse audiences. It's a kind of a three-part workflow. In 2 of these cases that I'll discuss today, we actively requested a list from the catalogs. In another, we received a request. We retrieve all of these materials and inspect them in hand and compare them to the records to be sure that these are the same, these are uniquely held. We make sure that we update the record, we update the cataloging records accordingly, make sure that these are fully described to enhance the discovery later. Once they are digitized, we add them to our own repository as well as to the Medical Heritage Library. We're focused today on 3 specific collections: our Incannabula Collection, our 16th century European and early English imprints dating before 1801. So these are not our only prioritizations. These are just a really, really small sampling. There are several influences on survival rates or how many copies might exist. For medical books, many times these are, or books related to health and healthcare. Many of these are cheap print almanacs, and I found that most of these items we receive on the list are smaller books, smaller by format, or they're by sheet count. They're shorter, much shorter books. One delightful part is there is really a wide range of topics. There's many health manuals. For instance, for one project, we digitized a few editions of Aristotle's Masterpiece. There's materials on hospital documents and so on. But the first example that I'll share is our participation in ESTC to identify those unique collections. Back in 2011, we requested a list of these unique items. We received a list at maybe about 300. After reviewing all of these collections, reviewing the items in hand, comparing them to the records, we whittled it down to about 270. And I have about one item here to go over. This is the dialogue betwixt a citizen and a poor countryman on his wife. The images are likely familiar. This is actually a variant issue of one that is actually held at the Huntington Library. It's been available in microfilm, and by researching, we were able to find that this is a unique copy, and now it's freely available online, freely available in the Medical Heritage Library. What I found interesting about this is it was published 1636 when London was hit by the plague once again, and it's a commentary on how the rich were fleeing London, coming to the country, and the country people were not very happy about that. There was a dialogue or discourse between the citizen and the countryman, and it was it has a lot of imagery about the ideas of contagion, the theory of miasma, or possibility of being infected by noxious air, bad air. It's in 3 parts. The last part has a great visual of representing death. So the next one, we were really, really excited and decided we're going to continue on with the efforts. Contacted the USTC, or Universal Short Title Catalog, and the timing could not have been more perfect because they were just starting the Preserving the World's Rarest Books project. So in 2015, we joined the pilot group of libraries, at which point the team at St. Andrews systematically analyzed our collections from the electronic catalog, matching our books to USTC editions to determine how many copies have survived to the present day. These results were returned as a list of 16th century holdings according to rarity factor, the rarest being defined as books with 5 or fewer surviving copies in the world. After, additionally, weeding few items from the list, there are just under 60 books that fit into the category, or roughly about 1% of the total collections from the 16th century European collections. This example has not yet been included in MHL. It was acquired by the library in 1938, then known as the Army Medical Library. It was described as an anonymous discussion on the treatment of smallpox. At that time, from 1580, 1585, Phil was hit by plague, typhus, smallpox, and their public health system, their council was really trying to figure out what was going on. They had a group of doctors that were trying to identify what was causing the plague. And this book includes case studies. I haven't been really on site to be able to really dig into it, but it will be really valuable to make it available to add to the collection. It is also an example of a bibliographic ghost. While searching the USTC, I found in the Iberian books, which the Universal Short Catalog links to, it does say this work might be genuine, but there is a high chance that it could be a ghost or a non-existent book until they look into it further. So this really highlights how important it is for us to update the records when we have the chance, and in this opportunity to be able to report the information that we found. With limited resources and really competing priorities, can't dedicate all the time to become full-time Ghostbusters, but by updating these records, researchers can cite these materials without hesitancy. This next item is available in MHL and was digitized as part of the Preserving the World's Rarest Books project. It is a Repertorio de los Tiempos. It was published in 1552 by Guillermo de Mies, Medina del Campo. It is a work, and it's an astrological work. Provides a lot of information on astronomy and also provides information on medicine to the public. Has a lot of great visuals that are really popular, including the Zodiac Man and Bloodletting Man. And putting this in context with MHL, you really see the changes in the illustrations with Zodiac Man, how he's represented. And one way to find more, which Pixplot is a really, really great opportunity, I hope. But by searching for almanacs searching for forecasting, and so on. By searching a little bit for astrology or almanacs, some really great examples came up, like some themed almanacs, like an almanac for mine safety, or in forecasting. There's actually one for plague and pandemics, forecasting plague and pandemics. It was owned by Sir William Sterling Maxwell, who is a historian of Spanish art and who was a prominent book collector. And he's fairly well known for being the first to use photography in art history. Our next effort is with our Incannabula Collection. And this has been a really exciting opportunity. We have a collection of roughly 580 that we're actively digitizing. At the very, very beginning of the project, we really used catalogs to just get a sense of if an item was unique or how many copies were held, just to get an understanding of where to start. We send our information and our holdings and our publicly available digital surrogates to our European colleagues at the Gesamt catalog as pictured here, and also to the Union catalog, Incannabula, the Incannabula short title catalog maintained by the British Library. So a few years ago, the Gesamt catalog, the staff of the Gesamt catalog, contacted the library with a list of about 75 items to really fill in the digital gap. These are mainly maybe unique items or items that had not yet been reformatted. Two of the items from that list in particular are editions of...
Krista, you have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay. Oh, I'm done, almost. These are 2 incunable editions of Michael Puff von Schrick's. It's basically what's known as the first work of distillation. First published in 1476, provided readers with dozens of recipes for distilled waters, insights into the developing technology of distillation, the increased access to print materials such as these available in vernacular languages, including German, influenced the spread of this information, and also the expansion of distillation technology. Manuals were often discarded due to wear and tear or newly available editions. So while over 38 editions of this work were printed, a limited number actually survived for each. These incunables are available in 5 or fewer copies, which is actually the median survival rate. So this last item is one of those editions printed after the incunable period in 1501, and you can see a lot of the wear and tear here. This was identified through the Preserving the World's Rarest Books project, and has been fully digitized, is available in MHL. So this is a work in progress. Really just want to, in short, really just want to thank the Medical Heritage Library for this opportunity to be able to contribute the collections. And while this has really been great virtually, I really hope to be able to see some of you in person someday. So, thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Now I am excited to introduce my colleagues from the UCSF Industry Documents Library. Kate Tasker is the Industry Documents Library Archivist at the University of California, San Francisco, where she leads a team to manage a digital library of more than 15 million documents created by industries which influence public health. Kate works to provide permanent access to these collections for the benefit of researchers, policymakers, advocates, media, and the general public. She is a member of Academy of Certified Archivists and holds a Master of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. Rachel Taketa is the Industry Documents Library Processing and Reference Archivist. Rachel is a member of the Society of California Archivists and holds a Master of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. Please, Kate and Rachel.
Thank you, Polina. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm going to jump right in and start sharing our slides, and Rachel and I are going to take about the next 15 minutes to introduce you to some audiovisual recordings that we have at the UCSF Industry Documents Library, which are held in the Medical Heritage Library. So we're here to present some of our audiovisual recordings, which include some evidence of the tobacco industry's harms to public health. I'm going to start us off with a brief introduction to our collections and then turn it over to Rachel, who will introduce you to some of our fascinating and remarkable video recordings that have been collected and created by the tobacco industry, but collected at the UCSF Industry Documents Library. So the Industry Documents Library, or IDL, is a digital portal to more than 15 million documents that have been created by industries influencing public health. It's been hosted by the UCSF Library since about 2002. It's home to our Truth Tobacco Industry Documents Collection, which I'll discuss it a little bit more in a moment. And we also have archives of chemical, drug, food, and now fossil fuel industry documents also. So we're talking about industries influencing public health, and we're referring really to industries whose activities are influencing health outcomes by means such as manipulative marketing, funding science that's meant to foster doubt about the harms of their products, such as tobacco, and industries that are working to influence regulation or legislation which has been intended to protect public health. So the documents come to us from a variety of sources. The first documents that came to the library arrived from a whistleblower, actually, at the Brown and Williamson Tobacco Company in 1994. The whistleblower sent a box of paper documents to UCSF professor and secondhand smoke researcher, Dr. Stanton Glantz, and Professor Glantz deposited those paper documents at the library so that other researchers and scientists could study them. About 40 million pages of our 15 million documents arrived in 2001 as a result of the Master Settlement Agreement, or MSA. This was a historic 1998 legal decision which resolved lawsuits against the major tobacco companies by 46 US states, 5 US territories, and the District of Columbia. Among other requirements of the MSA, this compelled the major tobacco manufacturers to make their internal documents, which had been produced during the litigation, available to the public. And the UCSF Library received funding to collect those documents, preserve them, and make them widely accessible online. Other documents come to us through Freedom of Information Act or FOIA requests, from public court records, from legal and journalist sources. And we're very interested in hearing from anyone who has documents that relate to these collections. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions about this or would like to know more. So what you'll find in the Industry Documents Library, basically the types of records that you would find in the file cabinets and hard drives of a large corporation. To summarize kind of the content of the library, what we're trying to preserve here and what the Tobacco Documents Archive contains is evidence in the company's own words of what they knew, in particular the tobacco industries, about the risks of smoking, when they knew that information, and what they did or didn't do about it. The bulk of the documents are dating from the 1970s through the 1990s, but we do continue to collect documents from current lawsuits and from other contemporary sources. In addition to the 15 million documents, the library contains over 7,600 video and audio recordings that were created by many of these companies in the tobacco and other industries. They've been part of our online collections, which are in the Internet Archive since 2006, and they've been part of the Medical Heritage Library since 2012. These items are all cataloged and contain extensive metadata. Fields were specified by that master settlement agreement, and keywords were assigned using the Tobacco Control Audiovisual Materials Thesaurus. From the multitude of original formats that the library received, we've worked to convert them to MPEG-4 files for access. And if you want to download other derivative file types or use files, the Internet Archive does create those, and they're all downloadable from our collections. I'll also quickly refer you to Polina Ilieva's paper here, which includes a lot more information about the audiovisual recordings and work that has been done to process them and share them with the public. Here's just a quick shot of our collection in the Medical Heritage Library, and we can make these slides available for anyone who'd like links and URLs. So by the early 1950s, there was growing scientific evidence that connected smoking to lung disease and to other serious illnesses. These findings started to appear not only in medical journals, but throughout the general media and publications like Reader's Digest. In response to this growing public awareness, the tobacco industry created a very large and far-reaching public relations campaign to not only normalize smoking, but to create scientific controversy about the harms of smoking. The tobacco companies employed some of the best PR and ad agencies in the world, such as Leo Burnett. That's a company famous for the Virginia Slims cigarette campaign, and Hill and Knowlton, another PR firm infamous for setting in motion the model that many industries still follow today, the distortion of science to create doubt. So these firms pointed the companies towards a growing public awareness of the dangers of smoking and succeeded in creating a major scientific controversy that would undermine public health efforts and regulatory interventions aimed at reducing or even eliminating tobacco use over the next 4 decades. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now, and she'll introduce some of the clips that we prepared for you to highlight our collections.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I get the better job, I think. I get to take you through some of the samples of the videos in our collection. And we have thousands, but we could only show you a few in this amount of time. So the first up are 2 examples of iconic TV marketing. Next slide. All right, so this first one is a clip from a compilation of television commercials for Winston. So Winston had a tagline, Winston takes good like a cigarette should. And they had sponsored the Flintstones cartoon in the early 1960s. In the mid-20th century, tobacco ads definitely centered on the endorsement of public figures and well-known characters to help bring smoking into the mainstream. Okay, let's play it.
They sure work hard, don't they, Barney?
Yeah? I hate to see them work so hard.
Yeah, me too. Let's go around back where we can't see them.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred.
Okay. How's about taking a nap?
Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it. Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend.
Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking.
Yeah, Barney, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
All right, this next one, Philip Morris launched the Virginia Slims brand in 1968 to capitalize on the women's movement. And of course, they have that slogan, "You've come a long way, baby." So they were marketing exclusively to women. Philip Morris presented Virginia Slims as the choice for strong, independent, liberated women. And you can thank me later for the earworm that's about to happen to you. So there we go.
Back in the old days, men were the masters, women were the slaves. Women had the duties, men had all the rights. Then at last, women won their rights. And one by one, they won them all.
You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today. You've got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long, long way.
Introducing new Virginia Slims, the slim cigarette for women only, tailored for the feminine hair.
All right, next up in our categories are interviews with tobacco executives. So industry executives took to the mainstream media to promote their own side of issues such as smoking bans. And this one coming up is just one example out of hundreds. So this is a clip from a 1988 CBS This Morning interview with Guy Smith, who was the VP of Philip Morris. And he also edited Philip Morris magazine, which had a huge readership in the 80s. I think it was like 5 million or something like that. And this is about smoking restrictions as a choice for restaurant and shop owners.
Your way to say you'd better keep that smoking section open in the restaurant, you'd better not support stop smoking laws because we've got a lot of money, we've got a lot of clout, and we're not going to get pushed around.
It's not Philip Morris that has clout. It's the economic force of smokers. And think about the restaurant owner. I think a restaurant owner, if he wants to ban smoking, he ought to ban it, but not have the government do it. What the restaurant owner should be able to do is take care of his clientele. And if he wants to have a smoking section for his smokers and a non-smoking section for his non-smokers, he certainly should be able to do that. But don't have the Congress or some city council say, you have to do this. Let the free market enterprise system work.
All right. And then another interview we have, just a clip of, is a 2019 interview. So this is pretty recent, hosted by Vape magazine in Indonesia. And this is an opportunity for the Juul founder, James Monsees, to promote their product to overseas markets.
Hey guys, Vape Live di sini kita udah bersama James Monsees, co-founder dari Juul Labs. Okay, hello James.
Hey.
Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Juul is not a quit smoking aid, right? It is not a tool to help quit smoking. It's an alternative, right, to cigarettes. If your goal is to quit smoking, that's fantastic. And there's a whole bunch of other ways to do that, and we'd certainly encourage it. But if if you just want an alternative, we think Juul's the best one.
All right, and our final clip in this category is from C-SPAN. It's footage of the 1994 Congressional Subcommittee on Health and the Environment hearings, also known as the Waxman Subcommittee hearings. This was about accusations that the tobacco companies had intentionally been manipulating the nicotine levels in cigarettes to ensure addiction. So here's Representative from Oregon, Ron Wyden, who's famously questioning tobacco CEOs. And his question is, do you believe nicotine is addictive?
Virtually all of you touch on it, and just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that.
Virtually all of.
All right, and then our final piece in this is our tobacco industry sponsored videos. So the tobacco industry produced a large number of materials to share with media and shareholders, sometimes at their annual meetings, and the public, and they wanted to disseminate their views as well as their own scientific research about smoking harms. So this one is called Open Questions, Smoking and Health. It's a 1992 PR film by Philip Morris, which focused on creating doubt about the cause and effect of cancer and the dangers of smoking.
Beyond the statistical situation, there are some common sense questions one can address to those who make bold assertions about smoking and health. For example, how can cigarette smoking be the cause of lung cancer if the cause of lung cancer is, as yet, unknown? In fact, no one knows what causes lung cancer. Yes, there are many theories, and there is the statistical evidence implicating smoking that some insist is sufficient. Beyond.
So thank you, Rachel. So we'll wrap this up quickly. I know we are short on time, and we hope to be able to leave some room for questions at the end of our group session here. So these have just been some examples of video recordings preserved in the Industry Documents Library and in the Medical Heritage Library. And they offer a preview of the content available for investigating tobacco industry marketing, communication strategies to cast doubt on the harms of smoking and to promote tobacco products at all costs. As seen in the Juul interview from just last year, the industry is continuing to pursue these strategies, particularly for alternative products like e-cigarettes and vapes, with a resulting negative impact on global public health. Understanding these strategies has proved crucial for the tobacco control and public health communities in countering the industry and trying to improve health for people around the world. And just quickly before we leave you, I wanted to highlight these resources for more information on the current environment of smoking on screens. So we invite you to learn more about the Smoke-Free Movies Initiative at UCSF, which is pursuing evidence-based policy solutions designed to substantially reduce young audiences' exposure to on-screen smoking and to create strong counter-incentives needed to keep big tobacco out of entertainment media. And then this link to the Truth Initiative's recent September 2020 report, where they showed that young people with high exposure to tobacco imagery on TV and streaming shows, such as those on Netflix, were 3 times more likely to start vaping. The Truth Initiative is a nonprofit public health organization which is committed to ending tobacco use and nicotine addiction. It was previously known as the American Legacy Foundation, and that foundation provided funding to UCSF in 2001, which established the Tobacco Documents Library and built the UCSF Center for Tobacco Control, Research and Education. So thank you all so much for listening and participating in this conference with us. We invite you to connect with us by email or online. Follow us on Twitter at Industry Documents. And thank you. I will turn it back over to Polina.
Thank you, Kate and Rachel, and thank you, everyone, Krista and Peter and Kathy for presenting today. So we will be opening the floor for questions, and we already have some. The first one will go to a team of Peter and Kathy. This one comes from Helen. Can we researchers send requests for the use of this tool? And the second question is relates to that one, how this tool can be used for specific collections to implement, how it can be implemented for specific collections.
Yeah, those are great questions. And I know there was a couple more around the same lines in the chat. I think one of the things that we'd like to say is that that Pixplot is open source software that is downloadable from GitHub, which is a place where people share open source software. It was written by Yale, but it's available for anybody to use. And you can easily use it on your own collections. It is a software that basically does the analysis and also builds the websites that you saw at the very end. In order to execute the software, you have to be comfortable typing some commands in the command line because it's going to do some Python. But generally what we find is that even if you yourself haven't used Python, there's probably somebody in your library or somebody in your academic institution that might be able to give you some help. There are also some ways to use Pixplot on hosted code environments such as Google Colab, which is a free service that Google makes available for people who are interested in doing data science and running code. So you can look for Pixplot on GitHub. And in order to get started, all you need is a folder of your own images. So if you have a folder with like 3,000 images or JPEGs in it, that's basically all you need in order to start the process. Some of what you were seeing today was metadata dropdowns, but in order to get started, if you have images that are uncatalogued, undescribed, it's totally fine just to start with a folder of those images. We generally say that Pixplot works best when you have more images rather than fewer. So if you have 8 images, I would recommend just doing that analysis with your own eyes. But if you have like 1,800 images, that's probably about the scale where you can start seeing some interesting results with the tool. Anything you want to add to that, Kathy?
Just that we're right now undertaking an effort to expand the documentation on that GitHub repository so that hopefully that'll help people get started with their own projects. We'll have sort of a step-by-step walkthrough on how you launch it.
Thank you. The next question is for Kate and Rachel from Ramune. Filmmakers, including those in the UK and Europe, feel that films and TV series depicting especially 1940s, 50s, 60s, think it's not authentic if everyone isn't smoking. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I'm happy to start the answer to that question, and Rachel, feel free to jump in and add your thoughts as well. I think what you'll find in the Smoke-Free Movies Initiative and other efforts is not to remove smoking from movies, but to clearly identify it, to enable people to understand kind of the context that they're watching a film in, and to understand the placement of smoking and the purpose for why it's in a film, and certainly to label it for parental guidance for films, and to kind of understand that exposure to that kind of cigarette imagery really has an impact on health, and for filmmakers to be aware of that.
Wonderful, thank you. There was a question for Krista about the St. Andrews University project, and I think you already added the link, but maybe somebody wanted to find out more about that project?
Sure. If you follow the link, and I think the website is back up today, you can contact them, and there are several participating libraries. You can reach out and they will analyze your catalog and return the results of the rarity of your collection based on the USDC holding. It's really exciting. It was a really great project. I'm really, really excited to be able to look at the list.
Thank you. The next question comes for Kate and Rachel. Does the Industry Documents Library have materials related to opiate crisis?
Hi, Kim, thank you for your question. Yes, we do. We currently have 6 collections containing documents and material that's been released from the opioid litigation and from other sources. So we definitely invite you to visit our website to learn more about those collections. In addition to our large tobacco industry collections, we also have archives on the drug industry. That's where you'll find the opioid documents, as well as chemical industry, food, and fossil fuel industry collections.
Thank you. And then a question from Melissa, Kathy, and Peter. Can you discuss any limitations to the number of images Pixplot can manage?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked a little bit about wanting to make sure you have a minimum number of images, so we don't recommend running Pixplot on like 10 images. But the other question, the other extreme, is just as valid. I think some of the folks who work on Pixplot, the technical programmers, are really passionate about pushing the envelope. I know we've introduced more features to support large numbers of images in collections. So we now have features that probably enable 80 to 100,000 images on the screen at any one time. with relatively good performance on a laptop or a desktop. One of the questions we found is really interesting is as you start to get like 80,000 images on your screen, it actually becomes a challenge of how many pixels you have on your screen, right? If you want to zoom all the way out to see the configuration of the constellations or the archipelagos, whatever you want to call them, you actually need like a pretty big physical screen to really see that. You can always zoom in. One of the other things we're trying to play around with is the notion of, hey, let's say you got a 6 million image collection. Do we actually need to analyze and display 6 million images? Or could we sample every 20 images? That, in theory, if it's random sampling, it should show that same cluster that Kathy found of X-ray radiography and line drawings and clinicians, even if it's randomly sampling over the thing, so over the entire collection. So that's another possibility is and I think we have some command line tools now to enable that, to get a representative sample in a visualization.
Thank you. So question from Drew to Kate and Rachel. Have you experienced any political or legal issues when acquiring these documents? Have any companies refused to give you resources or given you severely redacted resources?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this question as well. The tobacco industry documents that came to us that formed the bulk of our collections were publicly released, publicly disclosed in the litigation against the tobacco companies as a result of that 1998 Master Settlement Agreement. And there was a court provision from that settlement that produced the funding that still supports those collections. And in our collecting efforts, we are working to advocate for public disclosure of documents out of these lawsuits and litigation. And so those are kind of settled through the legal process, and the documents are public, and we do work to collect those. There's certainly resistance to some of our efforts, and we work very closely with our UCSF legal counsel and other advisors to create policies that guide us in our work to collect and make these materials available and publicly accessible. And we also are grateful for support of our various campus partners and other partners that are advocating for supporting this work and helping to find the resources that are necessary. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Peter, Kathy, and Krista. This was our last question. If you still have remaining questions, you will all have contact information for our presenters, and you are more than welcome to send additional questions to our wonderful panel. Thank you.